Well, welcome to each one. It's 7 o'clock, and we're thankful for each one's presence. We do have visitors tonight. Thankful to have you with us. We are beginning a new lesson tonight on our study of parenting God's way, lesson 6 on the training and discipline of our children. Does anyone need a handout of that lesson? Just raise your hand. All right. And so the training and discipline of our children, that boy looks like he's crying out for discipline to me. I don't know. That's a picture of Jason when he was little. He gave me to share. Now, probably his brother, right? The stories we hear about John. But I'm not going to pick on John too much because we're going to be staying at his house later tonight, Lord willing. So, well, in Proverbs 22, we want to turn our Bibles there, please. And we're going to spend some time in the book of Proverbs tonight because in this book of wisdom, it provides us with a lot of God's knowledge and wisdom when it comes to discipline and the training of our children. And so that's where we're going to be focused on probably a good bit of our class tonight. So in Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 6, we read, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." And this particular translation says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it." I thought this was a good quote from Charles Spurgeon: "Train up a child in the way he should go, but be sure you go that way yourself." Right? We're not going to be very effective in our parenting if we're telling them to go a certain way and we're not setting that godly example for them in our lives. It's kind of like a text we'll be focused on later in this series of lessons on parenting God's way, Deuteronomy 6. The parents were told to first take God's word and his statutes and commandments and judgments and know them and have them in their heart, in their lives, before they would impart them to their sons and their daughters. In like manner, training up a child in the way he should go, we better first look in the mirror and am I going the way God would have me to go? And so we asked the question, what can we learn and apply from Proverbs 22 verse 6? And before we get to that, let me share another quote, and I think there's probably a couple misspelled words, but I saw this a number of months ago and saved it to use it during our class, and I thought I'd use it tonight. But crops and a child. "I have a seed to raise, and I plow the field, and I plant my crop with care, and I thank the Lord for the rain he sends as I watch them growing there. But I don't sit down with a book by day and let my crop run wild, for crops won't grow by themselves, I know. Is it different with a child? I have a boy to raise, and I want a man when his growing days are done, and a man must work for the crop he wants. Is it different with a son? Will strangers care for my wheat out there where the weeds grow rank and wild? If my crop would shrink if I idled there, dare I idle with my child? Yes, I'll work for him and I'll pray for him and I'll do the best I can. For the Lord has given me a son to raise and I want to raise a man. Yes, my eyes are set on the harvest years when the long hard task is done. So I'll pull the weeds from his life myself, for I dare not shirk my son." This really touches on a number of the principles of truth that would be connected to Proverbs 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he's old, the harvest time, even when he's old, he will not depart from it. And so again, going back now to the first question, what can we learn and apply from that passage here in Proverbs 22, verse 6? What did you write down? What do you want to share before I talk a lot about it? Anything you have, Julie?
To start teaching at a young age and be consistent throughout their lives.
Okay. So how do we know that? Because it says train up a child. It didn't say train up an adolescent. It didn't say train up a teenager. You got to start early, from the beginning, right? And then, as you said, be consistent through that whole time and doing and giving them that and providing that training to them. Okay, great. Anyone else? Other thoughts, comments, Proverbs 22, verse 6? April? Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
The eternal impact that our training will have upon our children. You know, when they're born with the soul that will live on forever, and that, to contemplate that is really impactful. To know that our training can determine their eternal home.
Okay, so April, if you couldn't hear her, was saying that our training as parents of our children is very much connected to their eternal destiny, right? And so that really, really puts that weight of responsibility that God has given to us when we became parents and entrusted us with these souls. Remember, one of the previous classes we studied from Psalm, what was it, 127 maybe, but it talks about children are a heritage from the Lord, and how happy we should be when our quiver is full of being blessed with children. But we've been given this awesome responsibility to train them up in the way they should go. And of course, we're talking about we want to train them up in the way they should go is God's ways. And if we train them up in God's ways, there's at least a general principle of truth here, that the outcome, more often than not, then is going to be wonderful. I kind of think of when you made those comments, April, I kind of thought of what Paul said to Timothy just in his teaching and preaching, not with parenting, but I think there's some application here. He said in verse 16 of 1 Timothy 4, verse 16, take heed to yourself and to the doctrine. Continue in them. For doing this, you'll save both yourself and those who hear you. You see the connection? We're supposed to be training and teaching our children and bringing them up in the ways of the Lord. An evangelist or preacher is teaching others God's Word, and when we continue in the Word of God and follow it, we're going to it's going to produce salvation for ourselves, but also, he said, those who hear you. Well, our children, those who hear us in the home, right? Clarissa, you had something?
I feel like you kind of touched on it, but just the Spurgeon comment. I mean, obviously, if you're not living it, if you're training them and you're not living it, it's not gonna stick either. So it's just something both the child has to do and you have to do.
Right. It doesn't take just a grown-up to figure out or see hypocrisy, right? A child can see it. And so Clarissa's saying, again, going back kind of that Charles Spurgeon quote, if we're not living right and doing right, and yet we're telling them to do this and we're not, it's going to fall on deaf ears, obviously. We're not going to be effective in our parenting. All right, go ahead, Jeff.
There's a lot of practicality and wisdom in that. A well-trained child can typically be a less hassle teenager. And there's, as a parent, you reap the benefits of what you put into them when they're little, as they go through those restraining years.
That's right. So hopefully, ideally, I mean, if you're doing the work from the beginning, when you get to maybe some more challenging years of the teenage years, hopefully it will go more smoothly because of the foundation you've already laid and been building on with the way you've been bringing them up in your home. Okay, great thought, great point. Okay, anyone else? Okay. One of the books I really like on the family is by Brother L.A. Stouffer, and it's called Family Life, A Biblical Perspective. In Lesson 8, he has a lesson that is entitled Train Up a Child, and I want to share some of that information with you now. He said the word parent is derived from a Latin root that means bring forth or beget. It described originally the biological and physical process by which husbands and wives gave birth to children. Every parent knows, however, that there is much more to parenting than the ability to bear an offspring. Nothing, in fact, is quite as awesome as knowing that the destiny of a precious life the life of a child almost entirely depends on whether one, as a father or mother, fulfills the role that God has given parents. That ties into what April was saying a minute ago. The responsibility is stated so simply and yet so poignantly in the familiar proverb, train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it, Proverbs 22 and verse 6. He says 3 thoughts are taught in this verse about children. First, there is a way children should or ought to go. Train up a child in the way he should. Train up a child in the way he should go, right? And so there's a way children should or ought to go. The number one issue that must be settled for children, he goes on to say, is the question of right and wrong. The call of the world is strong, and a diabolical worldview tugs at the heartstrings of today's youth. The appeal is sounded forth in school textbooks, TV and movies, in much of the popular print media, spurred by the evolutionary hypothesis that man is merely a higher form of animal. Humanism seeks with evangelistic zeal to capture the minds of young people. The philosophy puts man at the center of the universe and urges him to trust his own heart in search of truth. Parents, the ones responsible for this training, must resolve that God's teaching maps out the way their children should go. Second, training is essential if children are to go the way they should. Training involves both instruction and discipline. Youngsters must therefore receive the right information. They must be enlightened by God's teaching. Wisdom from above must be thoroughly and forcibly implanted into their thinking. They must likewise be corrected at wrong turns in the way. Restrictions of conduct must be lovingly yet firmly enforced. This again is the principal role of parents, not the church, the schools, or the media. Finally, the proverb teaches that the most lasting impressions upon man are the trainings he received from his youth. Many studies today show that the love, holding, cuddling of a child in the very first hours and days are important to his emotional stability. Not only are the early manifestations of love significant, but immediate expressions of control have a bearing on who rules the household. Some have boldly affirmed, and evidence backs them, that they can form a child's permanent principles and conduct in the first 7 years of life. Solomon is not arguing the impossibility of change, but he is counseling those responsible for a child's training to make the early years count. All right, well, I couldn't have said it better, so I read what he had to say. All right. So, also, maybe before we proceed, just a reminder, most of you, we were given this book, God's Plan for Parenting, and there's a couple of lessons that directly relate to this lesson. It will be an excellent supplement to you. So lesson 6 is on discipline by Cal Campbell. He preaches down in Texas, Lufkin area. And then there's a lesson on, lesson 7, the very next lesson, challenges for parents with small children during worship services. Our last question hits on that, it touches on that, and we'll spend some more time there, but a whole lesson's devoted just to that, but just want to make you aware of that, those who have that book. Todd, you raise your hand?
Yeah, I think that first point, it's not intuitive anymore, and that we as parents have a mandate to pass on wisdom to children, because the world has gone to the far extreme of we should let the child decide on his own, and I shouldn't get in the way, if he wants to be a ballerina or something for Halloween or whatever, or he wants to, change his gender, whatever it is, that the world is just saying, well, I should just get out of the way and let him or her do whatever he or she wants, whether it's acting out or whether they've got such a strong spirit, I don't want to crush their little spirit, right? Mm-hmm. No, there's a way that is right, and we should teach that to our children, or we are ruining the child or letting him ruin himself with no guidance at all.
Yeah, excellent points. So we're up against a lot, and Satan's very busy in our world today, and all the destruction that continues to take place with the home and God's plan from the beginning with male and female and father and mother and offspring and raising those children and the distinctive genders and the world just always wants to blur that and throw things that are black and white into a big gray area, and you just kind of do what you want to do, what you feel is best, and your own personal truth. We hear that a lot. That whatever that truth is to you. No, truth is not relative or subjective. It's quite objective, and it's revealed to us in God's Word. As Brother Stouffer said, God's words, His teachings map out the way that we need to go and our children need to go. Norm P.
Just looking at the statement as a whole, it informs us of a couple of things, mostly what you have up there, but also that the way the child should go and the way the adult should go are the same.
Say one time.
The way the child should go is the same way that an adult should go. There's not a difference in the way. It's like, oh, it's a child. The way is the same whether you were 30, 60, or 10. The way is the same. Otherwise, why would He be saying you should not depart from it, not turn from it? If you're going in the right way, that way doesn't change no matter how old you are or how young you are. God's way works for all humanity for every age.
Yeah, the understanding, the maturity, the knowledge, that changes as we grow and develop. But God's Word, His ways don't change. And so we have to stand in the old paths, ask for where the good way is, right? And I think that's your overall point. And that's exactly right. All right, anyone else? Doug?
Her faith. And so in a mixed audience, sometimes, interject. Grandparents also have a big influence on the raising of, or at least their grandchildren.
Definitely. And I appreciate that, Doug. And we probably, others of us, including myself, and I think I saw Jason nodding his head, and I know there's others that we had, maybe we were blessed with a godly grandparents or maybe a godly grandmother. And April knows immediately who comes to my mind. When I think of the lowest of our family on my dad's side, and I was blessed on both sides to have Christian members of the Lord's Church, Christian grandparents. But even to the children of Israel, and we're going to dig into this a little bit more in a future lesson, but even the children of Israel, God emphasized, yes, parents, but He specifically said grandparents as well in the book of Deuteronomy, that they still have an important role in the lives of their grandchildren. And, sometimes the child doesn't have good, godly parents. Maybe they went astray, and so here are the grandparents, but they're a good, positive, godly influence in the grandchild's life. And so they can play such an instrumental role. So whether it's the parents are not godly or the parents are godly, but then you have this complement as well with the godly grandparents as well. So huge and so important. And I appreciate that. Anything else? Julie?
Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, the life. He didn't say one of the ways.
That's right.
So when we train up the child in the way he should go, ultimately that way is Jesus Christ. Ultimately that way is the way of God. And as Julie said, He didn't say, I'm the ways and choose your way. I'm the truths and whatever truth means to you. No. Everyone who hears my voice, He said, is of the truth or belongs to the truth. There to Pilate, He said in John 18. So appreciate that. Good point. Anyone else? All right. So this is what we've been saying. Let's lead by example and disciple our children. I don't know if that's supposed to be disciple or discipline, but disciple our children using what? The all-sufficient parenting guide. God's Word. That's the parenting guide. That's what we've been saying in our comments in many ways, right? And so we go to Proverbs, and we're going to be seeing this rod of correction. Now, I know this will probably be foreign to maybe many children today, and you parents that have children in public school, you tell me, because I know some schools still and some states still, but does that look familiar? They don't have them anymore? Okay, that's right, that's right. So, sorry? Not in California? Okay.
Been gone too long.
Not in California, I'm shocked.
No, they didn't have them back even in the 90s.
Not even the 90s. Okay. That they've taken them away? Oh, they were still, okay. Yeah. Sorry? 01? 2001? Yeah. Okay, but for those of us who are older, I mean, it was commonplace, right? In school, right? I mean, I can remember, I still have it in my head, first grade and fifth grade. And the one I was scared of the most, and everyone was scared of, was an eighth grade teacher named Mr. Hurley. Now, there was a couple of times where I thought I was about to get it from him, but no one spanked as hard as Mr. Hurley. But I don't remember any lawsuits. And in fact, I remember back then, it was more like if you get it at school, you're probably going to get it again, and maybe even harder at home. It wasn't that the teacher or the principal was going to get in trouble when they disciplined in the school. And you think of the various methods or instruments used. I remember Dad talking about, and his sisters talking about, how my grandmother, his mother, would, go out to the backyard and, cut off from a little branch, and they use that as a switch on the back of the legs. Woo! I got it as well growing up, but I never had that rod of correction used on me. Jeff, do you have your hand up?
We had an electric paddle. I was
For real?
That's what the rumor was. Okay, so you can't speak from personal experience of being electrocuted as you're getting spanked. That might be going into child abuse now. I don't know. Yeah, we want to differentiate between child abuse and godly discipline. So don't buy one of those that Jeff just mentioned. If you see one on Amazon or something, no, you won't see it there. All right. So, Book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 12. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights. And so as we look at these passages, we're asking, what can we learn from the following scriptures about disciplining our children? Why does God discipline us? Okay, that's the reason. That's the link, and that's the connection. God links love and discipline together, doesn't he? And he does it again in the New Testament in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 6, where this is quoted. So we got this passage in the Old Testament, but then we have it in the New Testament over in Hebrews chapter 12. And God declares that there's an inseparable link between love and discipline. And so even though initially unpleasant, love recognizes the long-term good. And so what can we take away from this? Well, since God loves us, he disciplines us, he corrects us, he chastens us. And so what's the follow-up to that? As parents, as fathers, because we love our children, we are going to correct them. We're going to discipline them. It's supposed to come from a heart of love. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, just as a father, the son, in whom he delights. And so the expectation there is that the father is going to be correcting his children, and he's going to correct his son because he delights in him, he wants the best for him, and ultimately behind it all because he loves him and loves her. And that's the motive. That's God's motive. That's to be in the heart of us when it comes to the discipline that's given, the correction that's given, the instruction that is given. That's part of the training. It's not just the rod, it's the instruction and the rod when needed. Thoughts or comments on this passage? Norm P.
It works because it's the end goal that's sought. You have to have an end goal. What should this person be when the training is done? God has that in mind for us. Where do I want this person to be when life is over? wants to be with him in heaven. So he's going to do things to try to make sure that stays on track. And as parents trying to do that with children, there's got to be an end goal that you have firmly in mind. And the Bible tells us what that is. So it's not hard to figure out. That means all the instruction and training, the correction, is supposed to be geared towards that end. And sometimes in the moment especially, that can be challenging. Because in the moment, you might be flabbergasted, you might be angry, you might be any number of range of emotions, saddened, but keeping in mind the end goal, where the end result needs to be, is why that becomes love, because no parent ever sought the worst thing ever for their child.
Yeah, no good parent did. Good points. And so the verse right before this in Proverbs 3:11 says, "My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor detest his correction. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, just as a father son whom he delights." So don't despise it. Don't despise the chastening of the Lord. Don't detest his correction. He's doing it because he loves you, and as Norma's emphasizing, what's the end goal when the Lord's doing that for us? Well, later in Hebrews 12, he says that we cannot be his children, his sons, unless we receive his discipline. And of course, ultimately, he's wanting to keep us on the straight and narrow so that we might spend eternity with him in heaven. And so we must not lose sight of the big picture and what it's all about as we are bringing up our children with the training and discipline that is needed. Okay, appreciate that. Jason?
The idea of you're correcting those that you actually care about. And I mean, I can think of it in my own life outside of my mom and dad, which I'm going to get on my dad for letting me take that picture of that battle, because man, that was exactly like it. But growing up in sports, the coach, as he's coaching, what you didn't want to have happen is him quit coaching you or quit talking to you, because that means he's given up on you. And I've learned it as well with work, with my new employees. If I quit talking to you and quit trying to correct you, then you're not going to last much longer. And that's just with life. When you actually care and you want to help somebody, you're going to give them that correction. And we, of course, recognize that as parents, also as God with his children, that he loves us, he cares for us, and he sees the potential and knows what we can and should be doing and wants to correct us as we should with all of our kids.
All right, well said. Thank you, Jason. Anyone else? All right. Proverbs 13, verse 24. Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. So what do we take away from this? It's kind of the opposite of the world's philosophy and worldly wisdom, right? Because what's the world say? It's not loving your child. It's mean. It's hateful to discipline your children. God's word says just the opposite, doesn't it? Here in Proverbs 13:24, we show hatred for our children actually if we withhold the rod. Why? Because if we truly love them, we will discipline them promptly, or as some translations even render it, diligently. What's diligently mean? What's promptly mean?
The word promptly is in some of the other translations, or be times was kind of a King James Version word. It's the idea of right away.
Yeah.
Don't let time elapse, or you'll forget, or the kid won't see the connection
Exactly.
to what he did. It needs to be. Sometimes you have to stop what you're doing. Maybe stop a conversation that you'd really like to finish and go deal with it, the child, right then. And it'll pay dividends.
That's right. So promptly, early, diligently. You need to stay on it and get on it, and don't let time pass and forget, and not have the correction close to the infraction or the disobedience or whatever transpired that needs to be addressed. Jeff?
Is that make sure it's not idle threats. Hey, how many times have you been in Walmart, kids acting up I'm gonna beat your butt if you do it one more time. Well, 5 times later, I'm still gonna beat your butt if you do it. The kid knows nothing's gonna happen. However you discipline, it needs to be you need to carry it out. If it's deserved, it needs to be reacted to, and also not inconsistent. Not one day when you're mad, you let them have it. The next day when you're in a good mood, you let them get away with it. It has to be consistent and applied when it should be.
Okay, thank you, John.
Norm?
If the one person that could render discipline with love is the parents, is family. Because they will receive discipline regardless. The parent does nothing, the child will still receive discipline. They'll receive the world's discipline, and the world does not care. And when they get of age to where they receive the world's discipline, they'll be completely lost and wondering what in the world happened to them. Because the world literally does not care how they feel, what they do. And so many people I've seen, people that I've known, that they didn't have discipline growing up. And the world smacks them around. And they send them to places they don't want to be and never wanted to go. Because they didn't have the discipline from their parents. And the world doesn't care.
All right. Thank you. Lauren?
It's really important when you're disciplining a child, even though it's very difficult, to make sure that you are keeping your emotions in check. Working with the kids that I work with, I have days that I'm having a really bad day. And so if a kid does something that I'm not supposed to, I really have to take a minute and collect myself before I dole out whatever punishment I'm going to use, because I don't want to go into that angry. I don't want them to feel like I don't love them anymore, or I'm going to treat them any differently. I need to be calm so I can give the same amount of punishment each time for each child that does something. I can't, go off the rails and yell at this kid and, say all these horrible things. I need to make sure that I'm calm before I go into that situation.
Yeah.
Well said. Appreciate that. All right, we have to practice self-control in our parenting. We have to not discipline out of anger. Yeah, we're upset, but I mean uncontrolled anger. And sometimes it's wise, lots of times it's wise to kind of step away and gather ourselves, gather our emotions, gather our thoughts. And I know my parents did that with us. It's kind of the part of sending us to our room, and there was a little time that passed, which is part of the punishment too, waiting for them to come open the door and come in. But I'm sure part of that was to calm themselves down and maybe talk about it a little bit before they came to talk to me or my sisters. Okay. Other comments, Jason?
Application from that, for especially those that are still raising their children, sometimes that's tough, and I don't know what the right answer is, because you've got this balance of, with a younger kid, like Todd said, they don't even know what they're getting punished for, and so there has to be some immediate discipline that's doled out when they're younger. Now, as they get older, there probably needs to be a little bit of time. I remember in high school, I had a teacher that was talking to the kids about how she disciplined her kids, and that she would tell the kids, I'm going to give myself an hour, but then you're fixing to be disciplined. And of course, I always thought, I sure wish you would have told my dad that. But it's difficult to know what the right thing to do is with immediate discipline, so they understand what they're being disciplined for, and yes, making sure that you are in control of yourself, that you are in fact disciplining with love and not another emotion.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Sitting in a class like this with my daughter, and she said, we knew if Mom cried that we weren't in trouble. And after she got done saying that, I said, I'm sorry she didn't understand that when I cried, I didn't touch them because I was so mad I knew I would kill them. And she didn't pick up on that, so I'm sorry she didn't get that lesson on that.
Well, she did after you shared it.
Yeah.
Actually, honey, this is what
Yeah.
I was thinking and feeling when I was
you saw me crying. Yeah. Okay. Proverbs 19, verse 18 from the New American Standard Bible reads, "Discipline your son while there is hope, and do not desire his death." What's that? Right. There you go. Perfect timing. Anybody have the King James Version? Those of you who have the Bible on your phone. Yeah, I have that. King James reads differently. Pull that up, Todd, please. I think it's the King James that I saw that read quite a bit differently, I thought, in this passage. So Proverbs 19:18. So what are we being told here? What's the application? Discipline your son while there's what? While there's hope. Lena.
Chasten thy son while there is hope, and let not thy soul spare for his crime.
Yeah, see how it reads quite a bit different? Let not your soul spare for his crying. Yeah. So.
Set not thy heart on his destruction.
Right. But the King James reads quite a bit differently there. It's almost like just because they're crying, don't let them get away with it. Be tough. It's almost the way that comes across to me. The other versions read, I think, pretty similar. Don't set your heart in his destruction. Don't desire his death. But right now, focused on this first line, discipline your son while there is hope. What point's being driven home there? It kind of goes back to train up a child, right? Make the early years count, as Brother Stouffer said. If we wait too long to discipline them and train them, it's going to be too late, more than likely, right? We have to do our best with early and, as Julie said at the beginning of class, consistently while there's hope. And so while there's still time to shape and to mold and to guide and train our children the way of righteousness, we must chasten them, we must discipline, we must correct them, but not with unjust harshness or cruelty. We don't desire their death, we desire their salvation, right? We desire their well-being. We desire what's best for them and to have a good, productive life, but most importantly, walk with God and eternally be with God. Okay. Who had the hand up? Okay, Marissa.
I was 22 when I started teaching sophomores in high school. 22, and I was teaching 15 and 16-year-olds. We had been married for just over a year. And at the first parent-teacher conference, I have parents of 15 and 16-year-olds sitting in front of my desk asking me how to make their children do work, how to make their children be respectful, how to make their children listen to them. I can't do anything with him. Well, ma'am, I'm 22 years old. I haven't raised a child. He's bigger than me and bigger than you. So, and she said, what would you do? And I'm thinking, you don't want me to answer that question because the answer would be to have done it while there was hope. At 15 and 16, when they're old enough to do what they want, and they're larger than you, and I mean, you don't have hope. There is no hope.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Marissa. Jesse?
Yeah, the old Webster's dictionary, I keep that on the tablet because that helps with some of the King James words. And, train, even as we know trains, is a thing that pulls in a line. Train behind a wedding dress is something that's pulled in a line. And the idea about, well, there is hope, you also train your vines. And when grape comes out of the ground, it's very thin and green, very pliable, then you do whatever you want to with it. You could literally train it in a spiral if you wanted to. But once it hardens, you can't do that. You'll crack it, that branch will die. And the Bible is replete with examples in Old and New Testament both about God being the husbandman and who is the vine and abiding in him and so forth. And the idea is that way you get hardened or set in your ways or in any number of ways, but a vine provides a really good illustration of that while there's still the time to shape it and train it straight. Because if you go out years later, you can't do anything when you chop it down and let it come back from the root and start over, which might be the illustration of the vineyard that brought forth the wild grapes in the Old Testament in regard to Israel. But I think that's kind of what it means while there's time, while there's still a tenderness there that can be formed.
Yeah, well said, well said.
Todd, go ahead.
Parents know their kids best. I remember we started some corrective discipline when it was just Jude sitting between us, and he was only about 6 months old, where we can tell if he's being belligerent, or if he's starts to make sounds in church where at least a small pat on the mouth maybe increases to a flick or something to let him know that don't use your mouth right now, right? Just basic starting lessons. I mean, it wasn't long, younger than a year old, when you can tell when they start arching their back when they don't want to do what you want, and you can swat their leg and they'll quit. But you'll get other people who don't know your kid very well who start telling you, don't do that to him. Oh, he's just sweet, he's precious. And I know those are nice things for people to say, but they don't really know. You know. And so we should encourage young parents to do what they know is best.
Yeah, okay, that's it. Who's holding her hand? Over here? Lemon?
I know we're talking about training children, and we're talking about little children, but I do want to say that there has to be hope anytime. There are drug addicts that eventually get recovered and come back, and some people come back to church. I've known people that would be hooligans during their teenage times, and they grew up and they came to the Lord, and they became the most devoted Christians and preachers, while in their childhood they were not trained. While they were teenagers, they were not good behaving. But there is hope for them, because God still loves them and wants to take them and for them to become Christians. And there are a lot of people that turn their ways, even in their adulthood.
Yes. Well said. Prodigal son, who represents the Father there. It's God. And he's always has the open arms, waiting and hoping will return. And so I think a parent always has hope for even a rebellious child, a wayward child, that they will turn back to God's ways. So appreciate that. A lot of good comments tonight. We didn't get very far, as usual, but we had a lot of good discussion. I appreciate it. So we'll pick up there next week.